In 1956, oil was first discovered in commercial quantity in Oloibiri in present-day Bayelsa State. Since then, peace has largely eluded the oil-rich region as successive administrations struggled to ensure sustainable peace for continuous exploration and exploitation of crude oil that has become the main economic backbone of the country for about 60 years and counting. As part of continuous efforts to ensure sustainable peace in the region, the Niger Delta Dialogue, NDD, set out in 2016 as a group of 50 leaders in the region to engage with a spate of attacks by agitators on oil installations that was then crippling the Nigerian economy. Over time, however, the NDD evolved as a safe space for sustained discussion of issues of the oil-rich region. European Union sponsored a research-based initiative to study the challenge of insecurity in each of the core Niger Delta states of Bayelsa, Akwa Ibom, Rivers, Cross River and Edo states, which provided a policy document for sustainable peace in the region.
Hello, and thanks for joining us on this edition of the Niger Delta.
A 30-minute television program, which aired on AIT's prime time by 9 a.m., formed a major tool of disseminating the research finding. The TV program offered the researchers who worked on the project opportunity to provide first-hand account of their findings, while stakeholders who featured as resource persons provided in-depth analysis of the study.
I am Stella Dogu,
a veteran journalist and astute politician with deep understanding of insecurity in the Niger Delta region. Dr. Stella Dogu moderated the 7th series program.
How do you see it?
You see, we must recognize that.
In the introductory episode of the program, the media coordinator of NDD, who is the bureau chief of Guardian newspaper, Abuja, was on set to provide background information on the issues.
This is the first effort at seriously finding a lasting solution to problems of the region. 50 leaders of the Niger Delta met in a one-off meeting because of concerns of the rising insecurity in the Niger Delta. There was an effort again made to organize, to get some researchers together through a workshop. After the workshop, 2 researchers were mobilized by the Niger Delta Dialogue across the 6 states of the region. And once the reports were ready, it was presented in town hall meetings, were validated. This presentation on AIT is also to get the outcome of the report to the larger audience. And so that is what it is with the report.
The Niger Delta Dialogue facilitator, Dr. Judith Borden Asuni, gave a rundown of the research process and methodology.
In March, we did a training workshop for the 12 researchers, plus the various coordinators. The fieldwork was undertaken in April to June of 2020 by teams of 2 researchers in each state, these being local people who are familiar with the issues, mainly academics, but a few civil society activists as well. The reports were written, and then in July to September of this year, we presented them in town hall meetings across the region for the people who were involved in the studies to actually validate the findings. We used key informant interviews and also focus group discussions to gather the research.
Bayelsa State was the first state under exclusive review, and the key research findings note that communities across the 8 local government areas of the state have experienced different levels of insecurity. The causes of the insecurity have been linked to militancy, cultism, sea piracy, communal disputes, kidnapping for ransom, and electoral violence. The study recommends the multi-stakeholder and multi-sectoral approach to address the issues with specific actions to be taken by the state and non-state actors. The key security finding in Bayelsa State was shared by Topo Seeta, Center for Strategic Research, National Defense College.
Everywhere we went during the research, they spoke about issues of unemployment, issues of poverty, issues of non-involvement in the oil industry. The oil economy has taken over the traditional occupations of the people. There was supposed to be a migration of the people into the oil economy. But because of the technical nature of the oil economy and the fact that people in this area are not involved like other people from other regions that have come into the oil industry to take over the jobs.
A Federal House of Representative member representing Sagbama Ekeremo Federal Constituency, Agbedi Frederick, who was in the studio to share his thoughts, is not convinced the federal government has the wherewithal to bring about fundamental changes that will ensure sustainable peace in the region if they continue to own the major stake in the oil installations.
I can tell you categorically that government will not do anything to change the situation.
Why not?
If for any reason they will do anything, it is window dressing. The reason is simple. The federal government owns 60% of this business.
Is that the reason why
That is the reason.
The report says that they stoke all of these insecurities, they do divide and rule, all of those?
That is the reason. So even when the operators of these fields, the IOCs, even suggest to federal government to do this, if the federal government don't approve, they will not. Because the federal government spends 60% of that money. That is why the federal government, is not protecting the people because of their business. A business they have 60% interest in.
What about the state government?
The state
and
has
its
no
people?
The state has no stake. If you open a channel where these artisan refinery owners can purchase crude, they will not go and bust any pipeline. So government need to create an avenue through which they can purchase crude, through which they can even develop this local refining process.
At exactly 9 a.m. on the 26th November 2020, insecurity in Delta State formed the talking point on Nigeria's foremost TV station, AIT. The research reveals that communities across the 25 local government areas of the state have experienced slightly different levels of insecurity. The causes of the insecurity have been linked to farmers-herders conflict, cultism, sea piracy, rape, cybercrime, armed robbery, communal disputes, kidnapping for ransom, and electoral violence. One of the researchers for the study, sponsored by the European Union, Dr. Ebimbore CFA, said they spoke with people across the strata of Delta State as she takes us through the work her team did.
We have our usual ethnic and interest group violence, which we are very much aware of in terms of, with the interest group, we're talking about host communities, oil-producing host communities versus multinational companies as well. So that has been ongoing for quite some time, mainly because of perceived cases of violation of MOUs or competition for contracts or issues of oil companies not giving employment to the natives or residents of the state. But more importantly, the same issue of environmental degradation, slightly underplayed, but still a very important part of the discourse of conflict and insecurity in Delta states, is effects on the environment and the source of livelihood of the people that live in those areas.
Our development expert, who is also Chief of Staff to the Deputy Senate President, Dr. Otive Igbuzo, said that the rent-seeking behavior of people of the Niger Delta is a trigger to violence in the area. He also highlighted failure of governance, desperation of politicians to retain power, and inability to put measures in place to cater for the welfare of the people as a huge factor to the spate of violence in the region.
Anywhere in the world where you have oil resources, oil and gas resources, or mineral resources for that matter, there is a tendency for rent-seeking behavior, a tendency for high level of corruption, a tendency for neglect of industry and agriculture, and a tendency towards where you have militants, cult gangs, people who rig elections, the guns that were used during the election will be used after the elections, and you have, bad governance, and the cycle continues.
He, however, believes decisive steps like signing of the PIB before the National Assembly will help lessen the hardship in the region.
One of the things that the National Assembly must do is not just to pass the PIB, but pass it in such a way that there will be sufficient provisions and mechanisms for the management of the host fund.
In the Rivers State NDD edition, aired on the 3rd of December 2020, the research reported that a number of drivers of insecurity in Rivers State are similar to what obtains in other states of the Niger Delta region. The researchers have, however, drawn attention to 3 distinct issues in Rivers State. These include the emergent trend of gang governance in motor parks and markets, and then the encroachment of traditional governance in communities by militant youths. The other very disturbing issue is the high tension in oil-producing communities in border areas of Rivers State. This is evident, for instance, in the dispute over oil wells between Rivers and Bayelsa states. Dr. Jackson said the research finding confirms that cultism, which is a major security issue in the region, has strong linkages with other criminal activities.
Cultism permeates through the entire 6 South states, and it's something that it's driving other kinds of criminality. And as you and I know, when youths are unemployed, they are prone to be easy tools to be used in such kind of ungodly endeavors. We also have environmental concerns of widespread environmental degradation arising from oil and gas exploration in most communities in River State. Livelihoods are being impacted negatively, farms are being polluted, the waterways are being polluted, so community people can't fish, they can't farm, and that's the traditional livelihood practices of the Rivers people, so to speak. So in such kind of circumstances, their own survival needs are being denied. So there is so much discontent, in our local communities.
Rivers State is one of the states that has been identified as the hotbed of political violence, electoral violence, in almost all elections that we have seen, particularly from 2019 to date. We've got a new notion of federal might versus local might, where the federal authorities, those who control the federal authorities, want to make use of the security, the army, to do what? To rig election. And in course of that, there is a reaction from what we call the local might, and that intensified violence.
A renowned human rights environmental activist and expert on the Niger Delta, Ankyo Briggs, joined Stella Dogu virtually in the studio. She emphasized that deprivation, environmental degradation, led to agitation in the Niger Delta region.
The IOCs are very responsible for where we are today. Like, for instance, if you look at the pipelines that were laid in the 50s, in 58, those pipelines are still in our waters. They're still in our creeks. And those pipelines are made of metal. Today, you have plastic pipelines. The IOCs are highly responsible for the devastation that started off all these crises. That was what led to Ken Sarawiwa's death. That was what led to the Joy Youth Council rising up, and so many other uprising, albeit not most of it non-violent at the time.
Ankyo believes resource control is a cruise path towards a peaceful Niger Delta, as several efforts by the government have failed.
The amnesty, in my opinion, has not succeeded. It has only succeeded for the IOCs, for the federal government, and for the oil well owners. We need to own and control our resources. There has to be a moratorium. We're not benefiting. So what is wrong with a moratorium on exploring for oil and gas until we actually get our lives, our environment, our future sorted out?
The research on insecurity in Edo State reveals that communities across the 18 local government areas of the state are faced with a major problem that affects the everyday lives of people in the state. The leading crimes in Edo State are cultism and human trafficking. Others are kidnapping for ransom, internet fraud, cybercrime, armed robbery, and herders attack, organized political violence such as intercommunal land boundary conflicts, land grabbing, electoral violence, and thuggery also shape the landscape of insecurity in Edo State. This poses a critical challenge for peaceful living and calls for urgent policy response by stakeholders and government in the state.
The law enforcement agency are in a difficult situation because anytime they are arrested, you found that either people are there, call the police commissioner, please release those boys. And if we are to address this problem squarely, then we should look the sponsor of this court group.
Human trafficking is a clear and present danger. It has huge human security implications. People go out, you don't know what they're exposed to. They could be indoctrinated by any kind of crime or into any kind of crime. And when they come back, they want to take it back on a society that they feel they have not done anything for them, that have not protected them in any manner. And we keep speaking to governors, please, when we talk about economic empowerment must be such that it must be of external quality, not just to go and buy Meshai or Kada, whatever. In the interim, it might help. These are quick fixes.
Yes.
But have we thought about, we're talking about long-term, something that can be sustained. Education.
Yes.
Dr. Iro Agedo of the Department of Political Science in the University of Benin led the team of researchers from the Niger Delta Dialogue, NDD, on a study of insecurity in Edo.
Courtesy in the states has a lot of political interplays that politicians are really involved in sponsoring a number of court groups. We have taken it for granted all these years that traditional rulers, even security agents, that they're involved in peace building, in peacemaking. But until this research was executed, we did not know that some of them are also very much involved in promoting conflict and violence in the state.
The report also shows that Edo, as a gateway state, gave criminals easy escape to other states. He stressed that the findings from the research should be taken seriously to avert future security challenges.
This is not an ordinary report. This is a report that should be taken very seriously. We want this report to be the Bible of the government and the other stakeholders. They should look at it very properly and ensure that the recommendations that are made here are executed very strongly.
Akwa Ibom was until the second quarter of 2020 the state with the highest number of unemployed persons in Nigeria. Today, Akwa Ibom, with 45.2% unemployment rate, occupies the second position after Imo State that has 48.7%. From the findings of the NDD research, unemployment is the major driver of insecurity in Akwa Ibom State that manifests in sea piracy, communal disputes, land disputes, youth restiveness, kidnapping, destitute street children, child trafficking, and drug abuse. A researcher in the project, Dr. Felix Idongesit Oyosoro, of the Department of International Relations in Obong University, shares some key insecurity findings in Akwa Ibom State.
We have sea piracy, we have cultism. In January last year, we had the Oro Youth protest, which the Oro youths who feel that they are basically the oil-producing area in Akwa Ibom State, but are neglected and are not forecasted when we talk about oil-producing areas in Akwa Ibom State by the government. The government erased those areas from the map of oil-producing states, and this led to a serious protest.
The research also reveals that women are significantly affected by violence and insecurity in Akwa Ibom State. Cult groups and criminal gangs perpetuate rape, sexual exploitation, and forced prostitution among the female folk.
There is an issue of a critical increase of rape in Akwa Ibom State. The Fair Rep is doing something on that in that aspect. Girl sensitization, children sensitization, and trying to bring up these things together. So these non-governmental organizations and civil society groups are doing a whole lot, but they need access to government. They need access to the people who have to take up all these things that are being done in the grassroots and enact them either into law or enforce them.
The chairman, Akwa Ibom Policy Advocacy Committee, Honorable Charity Ido, was in the studio to provide analysis on insecurity in Akwa Ibom. She blamed some lazy youth who have developed a culture of dependency even when they have opportunity to fend for themselves.
Just that the ones that don't want to work are the ones that are causing the problems. They will prefer to stay inside the bushes. They will prefer to stay inside their huts and be looking for how to get money. They are not ready to work.
Just a day before Christmas Day 2020, the last episode of the TV program was aired. The concluding edition of the Niger Delta Dialogue focused on Cross River, which in 2012 lost its status as an oil-producing state, following the Supreme Court judgment that ceded 76 of its 10 oil wells to neighboring Akwa Ibom State. The state may not be an oil producer today, but the challenges, including security issues associated with other core Niger Delta states, are prevalent within its 18 local government areas. Cultism is in the center of criminality in Cross River, as alluded by Ken Henshaw of the Center for Social Studies and Development in Port Harcourt, River State.
The security architecture and the security challenges in the Niger Delta has changed significantly, right? So prior to this time, when you talk about the Niger Delta in the context of security and insecurity, the conversation was always around the context of oil, resource control, militancy. But what our research has indicated is that the context of insecurity has changed tremendously in the Niger Delta, and it extends to several other factors, not just things derived, struggles or issues derived from oil exploration and extraction. In fact, the major one noticed is the issue of cultism, what is called cultism, but actually it's actually gang violence. So gang violence is one issue that cuts across all the states we studied in the Niger Delta. In every state, there are serious contestations by gang members who enjoy political patronage. And that political patronage sustains them, keeps them afloat, and keeps them steadily recruiting new members into their ranks. And cultism is also a channel that fuels other drivers of insecurity. So you have got cultism, right? How do cultists survive? When it's not a political cycle, they make additional resources by kidnapping. Cultism is fingered in communal conflict. Cultism is fingered in armed robbery. Cultism is fingered in kidnapping. Cultism is fingered in an array of insecurity issues in the entire Niger Delta.
The co-facilitator of the Niger Delta Dialogue and former Nigerian ambassador to Ethiopia, Her Excellency Nkoyo Esutoyo, joined virtually to engage the research report on Cross River State. She said sea pirates from other states find refuge in Cross River waterway.
You will recall that hitherto the shorelines of Cross River State were one of the most peaceful and the least infiltrated by militancy and some of these violent tendencies. But I think with the pursuit and the offensive from the military itself and the security operatives, many of the people who have been involved in these nefarious activities are beginning to find our waters a lot more quieter, and they have moved into these waters and now have become part of the problem of the coastline of the state. So it's not just a question of people who have come from other neighboring states, but it's also the question of becoming involved in this. And you've linked it up to the question of insecurity, cultism, and violence, which is something that are all interlinked. I agree with the researchers that we do have this myriad of problems. One of the areas which you probably didn't list initially was the question of communal crisis. You know, we have the largest land mass in the whole of the Niger Delta region, and most of this land is used for farming. So increasingly, there's now a dispute over ownership of land, and villages and communities are fighting and killing themselves over who owns which farmland or the other.
It is a consensus that unemployment, poverty, deprivation are the key drivers of crimes in the Niger Delta region. The onus is therefore on the government to take the right steps towards sustainable peace for the region, for peace and progress.
It's been 7 editions of the Niger Delta Dialogue, where we have been seeking evidence-based solutions to the security challenges confronting the 6 core Niger Delta states. We may be signing off on the program today, but the discussion of the issues in Niger Delta is never ending, and we will continue even on our social media handles. We must say a big thank you to the European Union that sponsored the research project, and to our reliable media partners, African Independent Television, AIT, for their support and belief in what we are doing at the Niger Delta Dialogue, NDD. The researchers, the resource persons, production crew, the NDD team members, the secretariat personnel, and indeed everyone who has made this program a huge success. But most importantly, we'll say thanks to you, the viewer, for investing your time with us. I am Stella Dogu. Goodbye.